Bismillah. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I am Abdul Kabir Muhammad al-Maliki al-Ash'ari. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, from the west side of Cincinnati, Ohio. And I did 9 years in prison. That's my, what do you call it? That's my alma mater. No takeaways, alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Call me Nadir. Of course, I'm from Dayton, Ohio. Big D-Lo, as we say. End up doing approximately 15 years in the joint. Went to Tayba about 2008. Yeah, 2008. So I've been with Tayba for, I say a pretty long time. Almost at the beginning of the
No, that was the beginning
of Tayba. Yeah, because they switched from, you know.
We the Tayba OGs. we laugh and joke about it all the time. How before the whole curriculum was actually set up, you know, Sheikh Rami was kind of tutoring us, I guess, one-on-one through the mail. So he sent us some tests. You got the test, right?
Mm-hmm. Direct correspondence.
Yeah. And
over phone sometimes.
But he sent us a test, a pre-test, and to see where we were at. And alhamdulillah, he was impressed because of Sheikh Ayub, our first Sheikh. Yeah, it was suhbah with Sheikh Ayub. I took shahada in prison. Did you?
Yes. I considered, yeah. So growing up, of course, I was around a lot of Nation of Islam, Muslims. My uncle was Nation of Islam, you know, subsequently, of course, my father. But we ended up going the Sunni route, of course. So when I came to prison, I was not necessarily all the way familiar with traditional Islam, Sunni Islam. I did know like the Fatiha, you know, the Salah. I knew the Salah. For whatever reason, you know, Nation of Islam was teaching the Salah, you know. So I did know the Fatiha. You know, surprisingly, I had probably learned it when I was like 9 or 10, right? But I had remembered it. So when I got to the joint, and I'm going around Muslims, because my pops telling me, you know, he's sending letters talking about Islam. He telling me, you know, but Sunni Islam, of course. So he's sending me letters and books and stuff like that. So get with the brothers, this, that, third. So, you know, end up getting with some of the brothers during Ramadan. This was my first interaction with Muslims in the prison. During Ramadan 2006, I believe it was. So once I started getting with the Muslims, of course, then I started learning, you know, the prayer, how to do the actual prayer, you know, from the Fatiha to the rest of the surah to, you know, the positions from ruku to sujood, etc. Then, you know, studies went from there. This was, of course, with the students. It's all students of Sheikh Ayub. Didn't know him at this time. I was at a different prison. He wasn't there. The imam that came in was Imam al-Rahim. Imam al-Rahim was actually a student of Sheikh Ayub. So I heard a lot about who he was before meeting. So his reputation was preceding him. But by the time I met Sheikh Ayub, which was in 2000, a year back, I was there 9 months. So about 9 months, 10 months or whatever later, I had got transferred. Situation broke out. Cincinnati, they transferred a lot of us. So when I got down to Warren, which was the prison that Sheikh Ayub attended, going into and, you know, taught at, and that's when I met Sheikh Ayub. So my studies prior to him was kind of disjointed, kind of sporadic, kind of everywhere. You know, I pick up a book, it's a book, hey, stop, read it, you know. not necessarily reading everything, but I was reading enough to sustain me.
Yeah, mine was a little different. I took Shahada in the county jail. Well, I didn't actually take Shahada. I just decided that I wanted to be a Muslim. Of course, I felt the grief of catching a case and getting ready to go to jail. I wanted to get out, and I was in a lot of trouble. So I made a prayer, a sincere wallahi. I made a sincere prayer. I didn't know how to make dua, none of that. I was still Christian at the time. And I just said, God, if you get me out of this, I think every thug does that. If you get me out of this, I swear I'll live my life good when I go home. And I just asked for guidance. Like I actually prostrated, like in the cell, and asked for guidance. Win, lose, or draw, basically. And I was actually preparing to die because I was gonna break out. That was my plan. Because they were threatening to give me like 30 years flat, no tail, no parole, nothing, and they stayed fixed on that number as a deal for a long time because I was facing like almost 90 years in prison with all the charges. So I was like, I ain't doing life in jail. I'm not gonna do it. I'd rather be dead. So I was trying to, being raised Christian, I knew that God existed and so on and so forth. So I was trying to get my soul right. So if I did get the 30 years, I break out of prison and they end up killing me, then I got my soul right before I died. That's how I got my awakening to Islam. And I made that prayer in the cell in preparation. I had a court like the next day or something. And after that, like that was the moment that I made my mind up that I was done with the streets and, a life of disbelief. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just started putting things in place, literally in the county jail. Just to be short, I knew nothing about Islam. I knew nothing about Muslims. The only thing I knew about Muslims was Osama bin Laden. That's all I knew. And I thought Islam was like more of a cultural thing, like Judaism or Buddhism. I thought it was more like Buddhism, because most of the time you see the people, they like Arab or Indian. If you see like a Muslim on TV or something, so that's all I knew. So I was in a cell and I was watching TV. We don't have a choice what we watch for TV, and I was watching PBS. And a special on Osama bin Laden came on, and I had a light bulb moment because I'm thinking the worst of Osama bin Laden for obvious reasons, propaganda and, the news and stuff or whatever. But on the flip side, I noticed that, he memorized the Quran and, he was, in his younger years, he was a serious student. And not giving any credit to Osama bin Laden for the record, but this is how I was introduced. So I'm watching the PBS, and I noticed that they had a segment when he was like writing on chalk, and it was like he put Ibrahim and then Isa and Musa, and that was Abraham, Jesus, and Moses. And I was like, I wasn't focusing on Osama bin Laden. I was focused on the fact like Muslims believe in Abraham and Jesus and Moses. So at that moment, I became very, very, very curious. And right after that, very shortly after that, I'm watching TV again, bored, stuck in a cell. The movie Black Hawk Down came on. And at the very beginning of Black Hawk Down, that brother was making fajr. One of the main character in that movie was making fajr on the beach. That floored me. That small, I think they only showed like one rak'ah. And that was like, man, that was so pure. That was everything opposite of what I've known and what I knew to be life. Like I could see the peace. He was on the beach. It was just complete freedom. And I was still curious. And wallahi, this guy came to the dorm that I was in, and he was following me everywhere. He was literally following me everywhere. And I was by the phone. Now I had a friend who cut hair, and I used to hang with him all the time. We called him Ak, Big Ak. I didn't know what that meant. I thought that was a street name, but he was the nicest dude in the whole pod. And that was the reason why I hung around him. He was just a knowledgeable, good guy. So this guy was following me around. I went to go use the phone, and he came and sat next to me while I'm using the phone. And I went off on him. I cussed him clean out. Like, who is you? You keep following me. Do I know you? Somebody put a hit on me? I went all the way off on him. And he couldn't really speak English. His name was Alosain Hassan. I'll never forget his name. A Somalian brother. He looked just like that brother. Wallahi, he looked just like that brother in the beginning of Black Hawk Down. And yeah, he was like, no, salam alaikum. While I'm going off on him, I'm getting ready to punch him in the face because I'm like, you following me around. And he's like, no, brother, you my brother. I'm like, what? I'm like, I ain't your brother. I don't know you. None of that. So Big Ak saw that, and he came over there. Was like, yo, what's going on, man? You got a problem with my Muslim brother? I'm like, what? I'm like, no, I don't know I don't know what. Dude, just keep following me around. He said, no, I'm hanging with my brother. He's like, no, he's a Muslim. I was like, what? He's like, no, I'm Muslim. And he had, bald head, big beard, the whole stereotype. I was like, what is that? I don't know what y'all talking about. He was like, nah, he don't mean nothing by it. He see you around me all the time, and he thinks because I had a beard, and I hung with around Big Ak, and he was like, he thought you was Muslim. From that day, I started asking them two questions. And I was saying he couldn't really speak English that well, but he would say what he could. And the only thing he kept saying was, Muhammadur Rasulullah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. I was like, what is that? What are you saying? And he was like, I can't really say it. It's like, Muhammad is God's friend. Muhammad is God's friend. That's what he kept telling me. I was like, okay, all right. And a few days later, I went to the gym. There was a gym inside the pod I was in. I was in the Butler County Jail where they hold like federal indictments and stuff. So they had a gym. Like, you don't never go outside of those pods. So they had a gym in the pod. So I went in there early in the morning. Nobody was woke. And he was in there making fajr. He lit the entire gym up with his recitation. I did not know I never heard it. I didn't know what it was, but it was beautiful, obviously. And he was making fajr. I was like, man, you got to teach me, man. You got to teach me how to do that. But I knew it was like something divine. I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know it was the Quran. I thought it was just something some African stuff that he was saying. That's what I thought. But I was like, man, I like that. I like it. I didn't know one word. Alhamdulillah, I didn't know one word, and I just heard it and I loved it. Of course, Big Ak, his name is Peter Johnson. I've been looking for him since, man. So hopefully if he see this, he don't know I ever became Muslim either. He started teaching me. I started asking him questions, and he started teaching me what he could. And he gave me a Quran after I asked him some questions, and made me comfortable with learning it. And I took it was during Ramadan in 2007. And I started to read the Quran. And when I got to Ali Imran, I was like, this is what life is supposed to be about. This is what has been missing from my life and from my reality and from the world altogether. That's how I felt. And at that moment, I was like, I'm going to live like this. This is what I'm going to do. And I didn't know nothing about Salah. I didn't know Salam Alaikum. I didn't know any of that. I just knew that those two nice guys are the nicest people that I ever met. And then Allah sent another, well, I can't say he sent the brother. Well, he sent the brother to prison. To the county. Another brother came in there. His name was Musa. His government name was Musa. And I was infatuated with the different names and the Arabic and all of that. So all three of us used to hang in the county jail all day, every day. And I used to just drill them with questions. They gave me guidance and so on and so forth. So that's how I became Muslim. And I was saying he taught me how to make salah, but he would just recite all of the salah and I would transliterate it how I heard it. And I had a little small, they give you like a small notebook and a little pencil, and I wrote it all on there. And he told me what to do and when to do it. And I started, I wasn't doing it right, but that was how I entered Islam. And from the county, I ended up getting class to Warren Correction Institution, and that's where Sheikh Ayub was, and that's where I met Nadir. Because we was in two different blocks. You was in two house then when we first met. He was in two house. So they got three different houses. They had 1, 2, and 3. And 2 and 3 is on what we call the low road because the prison is on a hill. And one house was like for the people who were not getting in trouble. It was married, so they get a little bit more freedom. 2 and 3 house was just buck wild. It was a low road. It was crazy. So, and we was in the 2 worst dorms. I was in 3A and 3 house. He was in 2A and 2 house.
2D.
You was in 2D?
I was in 2D.
I thought you was in 2A.
I was in the Snooty Fox, as we call it. Yeah, we was in the Snooty Fox. We had the Snooty Fox going on over our way, so you know, it was a lot going on in my block. You know what I mean? If it was moving through the prison, it came through 2D.
Yeah, that's why.
That's because we had man. It's old now because none of them CEOs was there, but you know, every shift was moving. You know, something. Yeah, every shift officer there was dirty. So everybody in the block was dirty. So it was like everybody was working to make sure no one gets in trouble. So, you know, it wasn't, you talking about the COs was looking out for inmates, looking out for COs, and COs is gambling literally at the poker table, bringing in money. Yeah, it was, but you know, it was, I was in there with a brother named Muhammad, Big Muhammad. That was my first bunkie, you know, and I mean, it was that block for a prison. That was like, if you wanted to be in the block, you won't be in 2D because it was slick. COs was cool, especially if you was some riffraff, they get you out of there. They don't want you in here. We got too much going on in here. Yeah, we was a corrupt block, but it was a good block for the prison. You know, it wasn't too much fighting going on. Guys was trying to get a little money, you know, and stay out of stay off the radar from the upper ranks, like the captains and stuff like that. But you know.
So that's how we met with Talim, because we didn't see each other because my house didn't go to rec with his house. Of course, we didn't even eat dinner and lunch or none of that together. Their house would go, and then our house would go, and they rotated the days. When we met at Talim, like we didn't meet like, hey, I'm Abdul Kabir, I'm Nadir. We didn't meet like that. We all just came to learn. And alhamdulillah, him and I progressed when Sheikh was teaching us. So when, you know, he gave us all like the basic stuff and how to do salah. And once we were done with that, we started to learn how to read Quran. We learned Arabic, and him and I progressed from the other brothers. So Sheikh Ayub started to separate it because the stuff he had to continuously go over. You know how it is. So we only had a certain amount of time with Talim, maybe 2 hours, and maybe like an hour and 15 minutes because sometimes he would be late. So he couldn't teach us where we had progressed and teach the general class. So he ended up putting us in a table aside from the general Talim so that he can, because we started memorizing the Quran, and first he gave everybody like the 10 surat, and not many brothers completed it. Him and I, we zipped through it. And he just kept feeding us the more we kept doing it. And then he started teaching us juices. And well, yeah, that takes time. Like we literally would sit with Sheikh Ayub and recite to him word for word, letter for letter, rule for rule, literally. And, you know, that would take away from the general ta'aleem. So that's how we got cool, got tight. Then he was like Speedy Gonzalez. So then Sheikh Ayub started, you know, listening to him recite, but he was like 3 surat ahead of me. And then I come back the next week, he done with the Jews. I wasn't done, but I played around a lot. He used to study. I played basketball and football, so that took up too much of my time. So that's how we got tight. And we got even tighter when he finally did, alhamdulillah, when he finally did like take all the way off. And I was, you know, I was still going. I had ran into a problem where, so if we finish a surah in the Jews, I have to wait till Sheikh comes back. He would review us Tuesday. He'd come for Jumu'ah Friday. So sometimes right after Jumu'ah, and we only got so much time, right after Jumu'ah, he would review us if we did something between Tuesday and Friday. He had longer surahs, so he took up all the time. So I was telling Sheikh, I was like, no, Sheikh, I got to do mine. And he told me, he was like, you know, he already did them. So he was like, you know, sit with him. And so that was a problem, because I was like, we ain't even in the same dorm. Didn't you work at rec or something?
I work maintenance.
Oh.
So I can move around.
Yeah, he had freedom. I was in the hood. I couldn't move. There was always fights and stuff, so we was always locked down. But I would be able to sneak out and go to rec, and he would be able to sneak to my rec. So they didn't bother him. He was able to move around the compound. He was doing plumbing work at that time, wasn't he? Yeah, so he was able to move. So I couldn't get to his rec when they go to rec at Two House. Because the houses were separate from each other. We was here and they were here, so they would shut down this whole half of the prison, and they would just be operating Two House. And when it was our turn, they would shut down that half, and they would just be operating Three House. So I would stick out like a sore thumb. I couldn't even get out the doors, 2 doors. I couldn't even get out. So when I had rec, dudes out here fighting, doing other things that they shouldn't be doing, you know, using drugs, playing basketball, football, running the track. Like, it's just like a big field, and everybody just doing everything. And he used to come to my rec, and we would go. It was like 2 big hills, and that was the only place we could get quiet. Like, it was quiet because people, you know, everybody doing all this stuff, and we didn't have any room. So we would go at the top of that hill where it was quiet. It was a few people up there, but they used to like work out or run on the hill or whatever. And we would sit literally in the grass on that hill, and I would recite to him, and what Sheikh Ayub taught him and corrected him with, he would pass it down to me, alhamdulillah. So that's how that bond was created, alhamdulillah. Oh, so that, yeah. Didn't who got me the job at Warren? Was that you or somebody else? No, that was Shannon.
Oh yeah, that's when you was in the library.
Yeah, but that was your dude though. I wasn't cool with Shannon like that. This guy was weird, man. He had some strong views.
He was a Fox News reporter.
Yeah.
He was a Fox News reporter.
He was so fascinated with Islam because he was a brilliant dude. He was a brilliant dude. He actually used to be like a college professor or something, and you know,
he knew his stuff. Now he wasn't. Wasn't no.
He wasn't a thug in the streets or nothing. Yeah. He taught at Ohio State University. He owned like 3 bars.
He wasn't no square as far as thinking intellectuals, but
he was sharp. He was beyond sharp.
He liked to talk. I didn't have the capacity to deal with him.
He was a big Catholic, and Islam challenged him because Islam is Islam. It's this is the most intellectual religion on the planet, and he felt that he was smarter than Islam, so he was fascinated with us. So long story short, he got me in the library. Me and him used to have a lot of debates. He used to just like challenge stuff that he saw me doing. Like, why you praying on the ground? Like, what kind of God wants you to get on the ground on your knees and beg him? He would say stuff like that. Like, that's not necessary. I just have to, he would do stuff like that. So he ended up being cool and get me a job in the library, but I wasn't getting paid for it at that time. So that was kind of a reference for me when I got to another prison at Madison. And that guy, he was at Madison before me, Madison Corrections, when he was a juvenile, because that's the only prison that they house the juveniles. So he had already knew the librarian. His name was Tanweer. So you, if you had your rec time, you could either go to the library or you could go to rec. You had to choose, but you have to get on the sign-up list. So you have to make a decision in the block and sign where you're going. You got to sign the rec list, or you got to sign the library list. And if your name isn't on either one, then you get an out-of-place ticket, and you're out. But they had guys that the porters in the block that ran the list. So it was hard to get on it because there was a lot of guys. That's where people could meet up and, do their business or whatever. So instead of going to rec, I would sneak into the library because, we all going all at once. It's like literally like 100 people walking all at one time. So I would just kind of, just sneak in there. And I'll get the Islamic books, whatever I could find, encyclopedia. I used to read the encyclopedia all the time. And I would go in the way back in the corner so he couldn't see me. And one time, he got tired of everybody. He looked at the sign-in sheet and then seen that it was way too many people in the library. And I think only like 10 can come, and it was like 30 people in there. So he just went nuts and was like, you. Lined everybody up, looked at the sign-in sheet, and if you came up there, you got to show him your ID. If your name wasn't on the sign-in sheet, he wrote you a ticket. So I was last at the end of the line, and he asked me what my name was to see on the sign-in sheet, and I was like, Abdul Kabir. And he looked at me and was like, I don't see an Abdul Kabir here. So he told me to sit down. And I sat down, but he came back and was like, man, why are you sneaking in the library, man? That's not right. You can get in trouble. And I was like, yeah, I know. I was like, he was like, what are you doing? You got magazines? Because people come up there and get magazines and exchange items, so that, because that's a meeting place. And he didn't want that going on in the library. And I had some books, and it was Islamic books. So I was like, nah, I'm just reading this stuff. And he was like, okay. He's like, you Muslim, man? I was like, yeah, I'm Muslim. He's okay. Assalamu alaikum. I was like, whoa. I was like, wa alaikum salam. And after that, he asked me, like, you want a job? And I was like, yeah. So he hired me to work in the library. And he asked me how I became Muslim, and I told him about Sheikh Ayub, and Sheikh Ayub was actually a very, very, very good friend of his. So this guy was mean too. He wasn't nothing to play with. And since then, he was really, really, really cool just because I was a student of Sheikh Ayub. So where do we start?
I don't know, struggles from like the administration or just period, like
just practicing.
Well, when I first got to, so as I said before, I was around, Nation of Islam, Muslims, if you want to call them that. And so prior to being in prison, my understanding or image of Islam was a little distorted, But when I came to prison, of course, I met Sunni Muslims, right? Brothers like Sharif, who taught me my prayer correctly in recitation. And he taught me tajweed. Of course, this was a student of Sheikh Ayub. I had met him, of course, at that time, and which brought me up to speed to going before Sheikh Ayyub. So when I got to Sheikh Ayyub, different type of experience, because I never been around Muslim like him, you know. I think, so when I get there, I'm saying this is a challenge necessarily, but this was like what was going on. I had a bunkie, he was Muslim also. They weren't Sheikh Ayyub's, I would call them the people that followed Sheikh Ayyub, and then it was people that followed a different track. I'm gonna say that, right? I wouldn't call it wasn't necessarily deviant or anything like that, but I would say more so
Divergent.
strict, divergent, but more so strict at what they have, you know. Like Sheikh Ayyub said, because he knows where their propaganda came from, because actually the brother who was putting out all this propaganda is actually studied with him. Like they went to school together. So they know each other. Of course, he was in a different country. But, you know, alhamdulillah, he always gave, they used to produce good information, because I used to just consume it a lot. But the problem with that was it messed my attitude up towards Sheikh Ayyub initially, because I never, like I said, I'm here 24 hours a day in a joint. So the guys I'm around they putting this off in my head, and, because again, I was young in Islam. I really didn't know too much. So whatever this guy was giving me, I was taking it, right? So, however, that messed up my point of view of Sheikh Ayyub initially, kind of muddled my opinion of him. Not saying that I had thought ill of him or anything like that. It was like, okay, we doing this and he doing something else. We ain't on that. We on this right here. So when I met Sheikh Ayyub, really met him, because I had been to Ta'aleem a few times in Jumu'ah, but I really never spoke with this person, about anything as far as pertaining to Islam or Islamic education or life or whatever. So when I kind of came at him kind of wrong, right? Under the influence of, person that really didn't know what they was talking about, right? So I came at Sheikh Ayyub kind of wrong and put me in this bass. He would not put me in the bass, he put me in my place, which is good from one point of view, right? He put me in my place. It kind of told me and then gave me a book, I ain't gonna tell you what happened, but he kind of put me in my place, put it like that. He got to check me. So I ain't been checked like that, but he kind of checked me, so he put me back in my place. But the difficulty was this, far as practicing Islam while in the joint. When you have Sheikh Ayyub, someone is Sheikh Ayyub's caliber, right? Him being a person who's studied all across the world, right? From his hometown in Gujarat, where he started his education, to Nadwatul Ulama in Lucknow, India, right? He studied there under Abul Hassan Ali Nadwi. So his understanding of Islam was way broader than a narrow-minded Islam that I was getting fed, right? So the difficulty was in distinguishing or being able to distinguish between who's right, who's wrong, right? Or what's the preferable course of action for myself in Islam, right? Because I can take the hard route, which that was the route they was offering, right? This route was very strict, very closed. I wouldn't say, I say closed-minded, right? unrelenting from the standpoint of not accepting others or difference of opinions, right? If they say, it's haram to go in public without a kufi, So now you looking at people, this brother he don't even wear, he makes slide, he don't even wear his kufi, right? So it's like, very strict. And so it's like, but when you meet Sheikh Ayub and he's trying to give you a perspective on something, it's different.
They was telling me that since Sheikh's sleeves didn't come all the way down to the bone, he could lead salah. Yeah. That's considered a short sleeve. You can't lead salah in a short sleeve.
Because of that?
Oh,
yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. This very individual, and we all fine now, but wallahi, this about this, because him and I was kind of like, they kept calling us kids, and we were very young. These guys were old enough to be our fathers.
19 years old was this time. I was 22, so we were kids to them, but it was a very obtruse dynamic. So you had that everything he just said, and then you got us that we just started our prison bids, so we outranked for that. They're old enough to be our fathers, so we're outranked there. But when Sheikh Ayub say, I gotta go to the bathroom, Nadir lead the Salah, Abdul Kabir called the adhan, they're like, whoa. So, that created a lot of the good kind of jealousy. But it was interesting because a lot of those brothers didn't have Sheikh Ayub. A lot of those brothers were locked up since the 70s. They had him, but they were accepting his authority.
Well, right? By the time Sheikh Ayub had came, that brother and those brothers were already there. Like they were already in the prison system. When Sheikh started coming in the prison system in the early 90s, they already had 10, 15 years in, and they had been doing it on their own, just writing places, and the places sending books, writing all kinds of places, and they sending the books, and that influence, it being the only influence that they taken. So with that being said, that exact situation happened one time, and Sheikh told him to lead the salah, told me to call the adhan, and they were mad about that. It was a handful. That guy, that brother, and that handful that followed him were mad about that. So they started saying, they confronted us, and because the Sheikh had taught us to recite. And, we all know the rules about recitation, so that was the only reason. Maybe they knew more than us, but he taught us how to recite properly, alhamdulillah. So when I told him that, I was like, yeah, brother, but, Sheikh did that not because we better than y'all or nothing like that. He just, we have to work a little harder on the touch. I didn't say it like that, honestly. I was a little bit more harsh because it was a argument. And I was like, you can't even recite correctly. So why are you so anxious to get out of the game? You don't even memorize as much as he memorized. So why are you so anxious to, want to be in that position? And he literally looked at me and it was like, I'll kill you. And he was a killer. And then there was another instance. It was over here, man. You get me in all this trouble.
No, you get yourself in trouble.
In Ramadan, Sheikh gave orders that if he wasn't there in time for Salah to start, for him to lead the Salah, or if he didn't come, then I lead the Salah. So Sheikh was late or something or whatever, and we would literally sit there. And we was like, let's go ahead and pray because we don't want to keep delaying. So we prayed. And remember that situation with Dirty South?
Oh, so.
So this was another one of those brothers.
I like him though. That was my guy.
Oh, they was cool people.
That was my
guy. He was like, no, I'm old enough to be his daddy. I'm not praying behind him. And I was like, this is, I pulled him to the side. I was like, y'all go ahead and start the salah. I pulled him to the side and told him, was like, listen, this is what Sheikh said. This is how we're going to do it. Y'all can go over there and pray or whatever, but this is the Jama'ah, and those were Sheikh's. That was his leadership. That brother came back that next Tuesday with a knife and pulled the knife out on me in Thailand. And he wanted to do it then, but he didn't have his knife at that time. And remember, I told you we were separate. He was in two houses with him, so he didn't see me none. So the next time he was going to see me was at Thailand. So when we was back at Thailand, he came with a knife and everybody broke it up and stuff. Well, I had to tell him, I was like, nah, I wasn't trying to like fight you or disrespect you. I thought that like, but you know, we got to follow what we're supposed to follow. Absolutely.
Within the prison?
100%.
Sheikh Ayub was probably the least inclined towards conflict that anybody you know.
He would trick you. You couldn't get an argument with Sheikh Ayub. He would trick you, and what you're saying, he would use it against you. Like he said when he he came at Sheikh Ayub wrong. He tricked him. He'll make, because he was so far ahead of you. He'll make you, and then, that was the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wasn't a hadith like when they were somebody was calling, they called him Mudambam or whatever, and he laughed. They was like, they don't know my name. I'm Muhammad, but they calling me Mudambam,
So you cursing Mudhammam, and I'm Muhammad, so you're not talking about me.
Right.
Right? And they made a poem or whatever.
That's how Sheikh Ayub was.
You know what I mean? But that wasn't.
Matter of fact, speaking of, remember when Trip came in there? So we all cool now, but another brother from that school of thought, it's not one of the four schools, let me say. Well, no, they are. Yeah. It was the South African, the ulama of South Africa. It was them. Sheikh Desai, it was them.
But he was a very strict scholar. I'm not saying he know what he's talking about. He's very learned. We're not disputing that. But if there's two opinions, one being more strict and one being more lenient, he would take the strictest of approaches to anything. I don't care what it is.
And there was a lot of fitna with him because
you take the strictest approach. And Sheikh Ayub used to be like, he's been like that. Don't know why. He knows him, so don't nobody really take him serious because everybody like, man, no one goes down that hard road like that unless you have something in you that, that's your character. Like, he won't go down the hardest path that you can find.
He started a propaganda too, like with the Jumu'ah being haram in prison. That was like so popular, and he wrote a big pamphlet, and the brothers were believing in that, and this was like one of the issues that they had. Yeah.
With Tayba, I was introduced to Tayba not necessarily through Sheikh Ayub, but it was through him. This is what happened. So I had just finished studying some texts with Sheikh Ayub in Arabic, right? Some Arabic texts teaching, sarf and nahu. So I wanted to go a little further, and he said he didn't know anyone more capable in the English language and as an American than Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, right? So he wrote a personal letter to Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. He wrote it in Arabic, right? So, I understood the letter because I literally just finished some text in Nahu and the Sarf, so I was kind of understanding what he wrote. I wrote a letter, not in Arabic, but I wrote a letter to Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, and we sent it to Hamza Yusuf, right? In Cali at that time. He replied, probably it took him a couple months to reply, He replied saying that, their prison outreach program that they had at Zaytuna Institute. Back then it was the Institute, it wasn't Zaytuna College. They hadn't got accredited at that time. But he said they used to have a program, prison outreach program that, correspond and send books and, back and forth with people in prison. But they had shut down that program. This was the response we had got. They had shut down that program, and he was sending, he said, however, he's sending it to another person at a foundation he knew about called Tayba Foundation, right? So he sent the letter and everything to him. I didn't know who it was at the time. Of course, then later on, Sheikh Rami was the recipient of that letter. And he initially wrote to me. So he sent me a letter and sent me, like he said, it was like an introductory, like placement test. I can say it was placement test. I can say it was placement test, right? So did that initially, then from there, we began the Tayba curriculum. This was in the rudimentary level, rudimentary stages of Tayba, right? It really wasn't books. We was getting pamphlets, handwritten papers.
It wasn't even pamphlets,
right?
It was photocopies.
Photocopies of paper, books sometimes.
I think that's what I was going to say. I think we had to have been the precursors to getting the staples in the mail, like the big thing, because he would like literally like photocopy whole books and send them in. I had some stuck at the mail room one time because it had staples in it, and they held on to it for like a month and a half, and I fought, and they finally opened it. They didn't want to open it. They were going to send it back, but they opened up the the books and stuff and seeing what the material was. And I was like, this is my college. This is my college stuff. So they started to let it in.
And so over the time, we were corresponding with Sheikh Rami. Then staff started being built over at Tayba. So you had Lumumba come in. Isa, and Isa came home.
I was gone by then.
So that's when at that time they started. This is years after. So initially, we started us with books. My first book from him, or first studied book, was Akhdari text, which is on basic Maliki text, basic fiqh, and beliefs on prayer. So purification and prayer. I initially started studying that with Sheikh Rami. Of course, like I said, it was through photocopy paper. I actually still have it. I actually have it in the hotel room because it's always in my bag. But it wasn't necessarily different from the curriculum that Sheikh Ayub was teaching. It was just from a different madhab. So Sheikh Ayub is a Hanafi. So the text that we study, which would be, it would probably be along the lines of Ibn Ashir. Ibn Ashir is another basic Maliki fiqh text, but it covers the 5 pillars, right? From Iman to, Salah, fasting, Zakat, Hajj, right? The text I studied with Sheikh Ayub, which was Ta'lim al-Haq. Ta'lim al-Haq. He studied Ta'lim al-Haq. I studied Ta'lim al-Haq with Sheikh Ayub, right? So that was one of the basic texts we studied. So it wasn't necessarily different, it was just a different track, right? And also, I was able to get different type of learning, I would say just different type of learning formats, right? Or methods, right? With Sheikh Rami, because he comes from a different type of traditional background with the Mahdara. They do a lot of, in Mauritania, they do a lot of memorization. I used to ask Sheikh Ayub, like they weren't required to memorize a lot. I mean, the Quran, of course, but then when you go into, if you were in Hadith or something like that, he said, of course, you had to memorize certain, Hadith you would understand or memorize, and certain texts you would memorize, principle type texts. But he said it wasn't a huge emphasis on memorization. Once I started getting serious with Tayba, about 2 years in, 3 years in, after I had already studied Akhdari, I was already in Ibn Ashir, I had already progressed through a couple of different texts that Tayba was furnishing for me, right? So I thought to myself, well, listen, I got this much time. At that time, of course, I had 15 years, so I only had like 4 years in. I still got 11 years to go. I got some time. And I was memorizing the Quran, of course, with Sheikh Ayub. That was my main focus with Sheikh Ayub, was Arabic and Quran. That's my 2 biggest focuses with Sheikh Ayub, was Arabic and the Quran.
Yeah, mine as well.
Previously, before, Tayba didn't offer any Arabic, right? They didn't offer really many Arabic studies or anything like that. Mainly fiqh texts or in purification of the heart. So I got all my Arabic from Sheikh Ayub and my tajweed and Quran recitation, etc. from Sheikh Ayub. So he was foundational of that, and which was, in hindsight, the best thing because it's very difficult to try to learn tajweed through the mail. You can't learn this. That's not possible. You need somebody that can tell you, listen, don't pronounce that like this, pronounce it like this, right? And you can hear it firsthand. So we was fortunate to have a actual Quran teacher, to teach us that aspect of Islam, the recitation of the Quran, the Arabic language, et cetera, et cetera. So it was basically, he was the foundation for starting with Tayba, right? Because he gave us the Arabic foundation, the Quran foundation, and Tayba took us to another point to where, involved in fiqh and then involving in tazkiyah, et cetera, et cetera.
For me, it was more structured. Tayba was more structured because with Sheikh, it was kind of like he came, Sheikh Ayub, he came on Tuesdays and we asked him questions and he would teach us stuff, like person to person.
More like
but
a halaqah as opposed to a class.
Very much competitive from the curriculums I've seen since I've been home. From the curriculums I've seen, so because I've been trying to find different type of courses and programs to get into, or intensive programs, etc. Tayba offers very competitive curriculum, right? If you look at his curriculum is on par with, in Islamic studies, his curriculum is on par with any major program that's out there, whether it be here in the United States or overseas. If you go through, say for instance, I looked at the Qayrawiyyin curriculum. And if you look at Tayba's curriculum, it's very similar. Of course, with sometimes you have different texts, but it's teaching the same thing, right? So the first year, if you look at your first year with Tayba, if you're doing Fiqh 101 or Fiqh 102, or if you're doing Adab 101, Adab 102, or you go through that and you compare the two curriculums with the Qayrawiyyin or what's the other one in Fez? Tunisian, what is it?
Zaytun?
No, the Zaytun. Which one is Zaytun? Yeah.
It's called Zaytun.
Zaytun, right? The one that's overseas, not the one here.
The first
if you look
college
at
in history.
if you look at those curriculums, very much similar. But from the standpoint
it's
of
the same books.
Right, it's the same books. Some books might differ, but they teaching the same thing because each region is going to have the particular books they prefer, but it's teaching the same topic, right? And Tayba has the same thing. They have the books they prefer, and it teaches the same topics. You will get the same rounded. He's not just focusing on fiqh, right? So he's going to give you adab, right? Like say for instance the Huquq al-Walidain. He takes you through the Mawlud, Imam Muhammad Mawlud books, which Imam Muhammad Mawlud, deals with a lot of tazkiyah, mostly internal, purifications with, his books such as, the Huquq al-Walidain, Maharim al-Lisan, Matharatul Qulub. Those three books alone will be enough for a person to perform a tazkiyah, of his heart. Those books alone be sufficient for any major curriculum. Wherever you at, those books are sufficient for tazkiyah.
I think Sheikh Rami's curriculum is novel for the simple fact that in the history of American Islam, what he did has never been done. He took most people, like some of those big, great institutions he mentioned, and the ones similar, have the strict, raw course, like from, back home, like the old country. Sheikh was, he got it raw, out of the horse's mouth, And he took those curriculums, those books, Akhdari, Ibn Ashur, if you wanted to, Khalil, he took it and kind of translated it into an American context. And even more so, he kind of built it for the forgotten believers, for people like us in prison who, and it was absolutely critical for me and some other Muslims that experienced what I experienced. He ended up going through it as well. But when we left Sheikh Ayub and at Warren Corrections, and we didn't know, we thought that everybody had their sheikh. We didn't know other communities had no imam, or if they did have a person there, that person was not certified in divine knowledge. So we had all these ideologies just all over the place, and everybody just cherry picking from Islam what they had access to. People used to treat us like rock stars. Like, oh, you know Sheikh Ayub, you was down there with Sheikh Ayub. Oh, because they wanted to be close to that certified divine knowledge, and they had not. I met guys that was in the system for 30 years and just heard of Sheikh Ayub and could only learn from his students just because they couldn't get classified to come to where he was at for a lot of different reasons. So what Sheikh Rami did, it was uncanny. Nobody in history had ever done that before. So he took books like Akhdari, Ibn Ashur, and I think he's working on a Risala now as well. And then he has the other, the Hanafi options, and then the Shafi'i options, traditional books that Tulabul Ilm learn and become scholars from. He took that and was able to wrap it into our context for us, guys. And a lot of times, myself included, we don't come from educational backgrounds. We come from the streets. There's no educational background whatsoever. So he was able to make these traditional divine texts that have been around for centuries. He was able to make it edible for just the everyday person and the everyday Muslim.
And I would add that how it's structured, right? How Tayba's curriculum is structured, it's more of a, what they would call like Tabya, right? It's a graded approach. He doesn't give you a Bukhari. Like, you send you a Bukhari book, read Bukhari, or send you Riyadh al-Salihin or something like that. Read that, just giving you books and text because he has the text or whatever. He starts you from where you need to start at, right? The starting point with any student of knowledge, right, is self-knowledge, that which applies to you as an individual, Fard Ain, right? And then, Fard Kifaya, if you reach that level. Because there's enough, and it's sufficient enough knowledge and studies that you can be done in Fard Ain that would satisfy you if you have that desire to study. And you can continue in that track. And if you want, there's other, what they would consider to be voluntary studies, right? So when I went further in with Sheikh Rami, it was I did voluntary studies at the time. I'm not sure if they offering it currently, right? As far as like Arabic, I did Tuhfatul Saniya, which is a commentary on Ajurumiyya, which is a book on Arabic grammar. A very famous book on Arabic grammar, the Ajurumiyya. And I did that with him, mostly through correspondence, but of course we start contacting on the phone because after a while, Tayba start having the ability to accept phone calls. So we would call, set up calls. I would, schedule a call with him and call him. We would talk, and You just going back and forth, 2-3 calls back to back. Like, hey, sitting in rotate back on here, man. Y'all gonna have to wait. So we used to be corresponding on the phone like that, correcting and teaching through conversation over telephone, right? But those conversations were probably more helpful than just the text being written, and because it's a lot of time. It might be a week before you hear back after you sent the letter, right? So, and sometimes if you're studying, you're not really wanting to wait a week to have this question answered that you were reading on this line. And you done went forward and you missed that, but that might have helped you for something that's further in the text. So being able to call, to discuss a topic, to discuss an issue you having, to review and to test, because he did test you. Now these tests weren't video tests, so it was necessary for a person to have some type of integrity, because once he tests you, you can't have the text in front of you. Far as if you were doing a mahdara course, right? Meaning that you had memorized the text, which was after I had went through some of the courses already. I had went back and did the mahdara, right? Where I memorized those texts. That was an experience in and of itself, right? Because I never did it. The only thing I was memorizing with Sheikh Ayub was the Quran. I've never memorized any text or attempted to memorize any text or had a desire to say, I didn't know that was even a thing, right? I knew people memorized the Quran, but I never knew that memorizing classical texts was actually something that some of the scholars did, behind hearing, or reading stories that, people like Sheikh or Imam Shafi'i would memorize a page soon as he looked at it. He had to cover a page when he opened a book because he didn't want the two to mix. Beyond that, I didn't know that people that was a thing. I was introduced to that, which, alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me to memorize a few texts.
I had got like a post from you. Can you tell us a little bit about the commentary you did on Abdul?
Oh, you seen that? Well,
tell me a little bit about like your motivation for doing it and how just give me a little bit.
For me, it was like a exercise in what I had just learned, right? I had just initially finished studying the Tuhfatul Saniyya, which is the Ajurumiyya, right? So I had just finished studying the Ajurumiyya with Sheikh Rami. On the phone, we did it on the phone test. We reviewed on the phone and things like that. And he had sent me, he said, well, I'm gonna send you a couple of texts, right? Which was the Halal Masail, which is the text you're talking about. He sent me the Halal Masail, which is a commentary on the Akhdari, basic fiqh tech of Maliki school. So I'm like, okay, I think I know Arabic pretty well. Thinking high-minded of myself, thinking I know Arabic pretty well. Let's try my hand at translation, right? It's more of an exercise than anything else. So I begin translating those texts that he sent me, all the Arabic texts, because he started sending me all my texts. After a while, all my texts that he sent were all in Arabic. So I just like the English it's just excised the English. He's sending you these Arabic texts. So I began to study text in Arabic. But as a new Arabic learner, it's like, you looking at it, it's almost gibberish first. It's not necessarily because you know the rules, the grammar rules, but vocabulary pickup is necessary. So that's how I picked up my vocabulary to start translating any Arabic text that I got my hand on. I just start picking passages out and trying to translate it. And that's how I obtained or built my vocabulary to understand the Arabic language. So yeah, I started the Halal Masail right after I finished the Tuhfatul Saniyya, and ended up translating the whole text, typing the text up. I did my own personal edit. Of course, I sent to Sheikh Rami for him to edit and check it out. And inshallah, we have it published, which is a very good text. Gives a lot of the what they would consider to be proofs of the madhab, far as whether it be from the hadith or from the sayings of the companions, et cetera, but it gives you a rundown on, okay, this is why a Maliki prays and does the purification in this manner, right? It gives you the hadith that it comes from. Because people would say, oh, why does Malikis leave their hand at the side? That's not sunnah. You know, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ didn't use it. Well, yes, he did, you know, and we have proof for that. And it's founded upon something, right? And that's what that text provided. So that's why I translated it, because a lot of people didn't understand why people do it. Well, Malikis pray in a certain way. I did that for the benefit of brothers that didn't know the evidence for that. This is the evidence. It's not unfounded. There is foundation for why we do what we do. And inshallah, like I said, the book could be published, inshallah. Oh yeah, for me, listen, Tayba helped me out a lot. Let me say this, because when I first came home, you know, I was working. I initially got a job. I was in the halfway house initially. Then I got, I was working in a warehouse or whatever. It was difficult, of course, you know, the transition, because I don't know if anyone knows this, but I went to prison at 15 years old, right? So I went to prison as a child or kid. I wouldn't say a child. I was a kid. I was a teenager. You know, I was probably more advanced than most teenagers at that time. Nonetheless, I was a teenager, right? Charged as an adult, did 15 years, coming home at 30 years old. So I spent as much time as I lived on the streets, I spent that same amount of time in prison.
Half your life.
Right? So half my life I've been in prison. No years in, I've been in society as an adult for 3 years. Well, not even 3 years, because it's been 2.5 years maybe since I've been home. Tayba provided me, they helped me out. They provided me, actually Tayba bought my first tool kit, you know, because I'm a mechanic. Tayba bought my first tool kit, you know. Sheikh Rami, you know, he told me, you know, oh, you know, we can help you out and make sure, you know, you work on cars. We need to get you some tools, right? Because in the industry, you can't work in that field unless you have your own tools. They don't provide tools for you. Right? And Tayba provided me with that, which I still, you know, I still pay my bills with those tools to this day, you know. Right, you know, so I use I'm still using those tools, huh? Yeah, Sadaqah Jariyah, yeah. I'm still using those tools, you know. They you know, tools are very important in my trade, and I have those due to Tayba being able to provide me with those tools, right? Yeah, so Tayba's been a big help. Not only just that's financial help from the standpoint of business, but also from the standpoint, because I've had many issues that I've called Sheikh Rami about the brother Isa that's in the office, Lumumba, you know. These brothers helped me, Tabari. I've spoken with Tabari on numerous occasions. So we got, you know, I got a lot of help from, whether it just be, not just necessarily financial help, but mental help, I could say, right?
Yeah, like I was going to ask, I wonder, you can ask her if you want, but how was it transition? Because it is a big step, like coming from, like, you know, coming in at 15, coming out 15 years later, and then being an adult and having to deal with.
I would say the largest difficulty for me has been and still is, you know, in prison, there's a certain type of Islam that's lived, right? That same type of Islam isn't going to be what you will see here in society, right? So the biggest difficulty was not only understanding what was going on, because in prison, there's a lot of brotherhood in prison, right? But that's all we had, right? We didn't have, we were in a small area in a cage, basically, and it was us. It was 2,000 people here, right? And it's 100 Muslims. So all we had was us. Coming home, it's like, you walk past a Muslim, sometimes they won't even salam you. Or you salam them, they look at you and keep walking. Or they hit you with salam, like, barely hear them, right?
Or you get the
Inshallah.
Move my house to dinner?
Yeah, inshallah.
No, it ain't.
It ain't happen.
Here, inshallah.
So it's different, but being able to, or having being able to transition into here, how do I make that transition to actually practice, right? And actually remain on that, right? Because now it's a whole different type of life. I didn't live on the streets as an adult prior to that, right? Prior to my Islam. I didn't, so my whole framework has to change. Mental framework, how I think about life, how I direct my life has to change. And the biggest transition was, okay, previously I'm comfortable with a certain type of environment. Not necessarily prison, I'm talking about before prison, because I was in the streets also, right? So you're talking about, I can't do those things anymore. And those are things which we are comfortable with. The environments, the people, the customs, etc., all contradict Islam most of the time. So how do I remove myself from that, right? So I had to move cities. So I didn't go back home. I didn't go back to where I was from. I went to a whole nother city, specifically to try and remove myself from that, because you're going to always fall back into what you're comfortable with. And if I fall back into what I'm comfortable with, I might be back in the joint, right? So that was been the biggest difficulty, is being able to change my mind state and being able to sustain that change under all circumstances. And it's not easy. It's a lot of times, it pulls you, things that, you shouldn't be doing, it pulls you back in. Perhaps finances might get difficult, and you have access or the connections to do things you ain't supposed to be doing, right? Because least of which no one's helping you. No one's going to pay my rent next month except me. All right? This ain't prison. You can't just sit in here and, and sit back. You'll be sitting on the street somewhere. And when you can't get a job or something like that because of a felony or you don't qualify, you don't have the skills, then, life becomes difficult. And only thing that can keep you straight or keep you from regressing is, inshallah, a strong iman, right? And then the principles which come from that, which is not easy. There's nothing easy about not going to do what you're comfortable with doing. And I'm not saying comfortable, I mean, when I say comfortable, I mean, you know how to do it. So, it will make things easier for you, right? You want to turn a couple plays, you can pay some bills. It's more so out of people go back to doing that type stuff out of necessity, not necessarily out of a willing desire to do it. I don't think many of the Muslims I know that regressed back into the streets willingly did it. Like they had a willing desire just to go do it. It was always something you would see them, brothers, you always see brothers out and then you be like, dang, they doing good. Islam, we doing good. But then, a year later, 2 years later, he might be back in the streets. And then you like, hey, what happened? Then you might talk to him. He'll tell you what happened. You be like, but you don't have no answer for that. I can't tell a man that's stomach growling, hey, brother, that's haram, bro. You can't be eating that. Or, his stomach growling, that's haram, bro. You can't be making money like that. Basically, you telling this man, hey, go somewhere and die. You can't support yourself or your family or whatever. All right? That's been the biggest difficulty. And it still goes on, still trying to figure that out. That's very difficult because making money in this society isn't easy, right? And then the jobs that are available aren't living wage jobs, so you'll be in a very difficult situation. If you have a family, then it's more difficult even still.
That's why it's important to have a support system.
Right.
And brothers that you can look at and be like, okay, this brother, you know what I'm saying? Like looking at yourself in the mirror, like this brother doing his thing, I need to maintain, be patient, or having somebody that you can talk to that understand, what you're coming from, where you're coming at. You know what I'm saying? That really helps a lot.
Right. And you don't want to be the one that's with their hand out all the time either.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I don't want to call Tayba or any found. I don't do that, but I'm just saying I'm not going to be calling Sheikh Rami every time I need a couple dollars and be like, hey, I'm in a bad situation. You don't want to do that. Not because it's more, I don't think it's pride. It's just like, I'm a man. I can't be asking this guy for. Right? I got to figure it out. We might see that as, oh, he prideful. No, why is this man paying my bills? Right? But if I can't do it, then through legal means, and, I'm from the background of, I'm from the background of people knowing how to get it illegally. What's the alternative? What's the prevention from me going back to that? I mean, Islam is the prevention, but however,
that's kind of what I meant.
It becomes difficult also, right? You need that support system.
Brothers that you have in your circle can help you from making that step. I'm gonna go get it, but then you're like, you got your brother, and you're like, okay, well, you know what I'm saying? Like, you kind of have that responsibility, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, your company's either gonna elevate you or
It's the company you keep, right?
It's gonna either call your debt. It's gonna either cause you to digress. So that's what I mean. Like the company that you keep, helps you in those situations. Like when you don't have nothing or anything like that. By having that good company and having that support system, it allows you to be able to, deal with that hardship in an honorable way, and not digress.
Yeah.
But the same question for you: how did Tayba help you with your reentry, and how was like adjusting to society and stuff like that? Inshallah.
So Tayba was there from the beginning. It was Sheikh Rami gave me his personal number, all his personal contact, and assured me anything that I need. He was even at one point going to help me get a house. And he was introducing me into different methods, different programs that you can get into to help you get your first house or whatnot. He also offered, told him that it was hard to find work and find employment, and he assured me that he'll assist me however he could possibly assist me. Me personally, I'm not. I wasn't waiting on the sheikh, but I'm a go-getter. I'm a hustler. I've always been a hustler. Even when I was in the streets, if the guy down the street ain't have no drugs for me, I'm going across town. If the guy across town ain't had the drugs, I'm going out of state. I'm gonna go get it. So I didn't need it. I didn't need the help. Alhamdulillah, I started a business, a landscaping business, and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala blessed my intentions to struggle in order to get ahead. It was extremely hard, but I'm a hard dude. I don't know no other kind of way, man. I bang out in the paint, period. I don't let nothing defeat me. If I fight and I get defeated, then that's what it was. I don't feel no kind of way about it. I did my best. But as far as the challenges in life, I haven't met too many of them that I've fought and I didn't defeat them. But you got to fight a real fight. And that's my mentality since I came home. Going back to prison was just not an option for me. Just for the simple fact, I would be homeless. I would sleep outside. I would have nobody. I would have no friends. I would have no family. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not going back to prison. I wasn't going to put myself in any kind of situations where it'll call for me to go back to prison. So it was good to know that Sheikh was there 100%. But like he said, yeah, I'm gonna go get it. I ain't calling nobody. Like he let me know anything I need. And at one point in time, when I really started to get serious with my landscaping business, I knew I needed bigger equipment because I started out using my mother's push mower. I was just borrowed that. They said, let me try this thing out, cut people's grass. And since I'd sold drugs, I was always good with numbers. And I got the idea because my mom was like, when I lost my job because of my background, lost 2 jobs that I worked hard at, didn't miss days, any of that. And they were through temp services because that's what you can get right now. Anything else, you have to. I didn't even know how to do a resume. Sheikh was helping me with that too, but I couldn't wait. First I got to learn how to make a resume, and Sheikh was telling me about Google Docs. And when he said the word Google Docs, it was like he was speaking another language. I was like, what? I didn't know. I couldn't, and I didn't have time to sit there on the phone and be like, okay, you push this, and you push this, and you push that. I knew I could go to the temp service and they'll find me something, and that'll give me some money and get me rolling, and then I'll figure something out. But by the time it came for me to get hired on after my 90 days with 2 jobs, they said, oh, we can't, your background, we can't fire you. We can't hire you because I got a crime with the involvement of a firearm. And it follows you. It's a lot. I can't do Uber Eats. I can't do none of that stuff. He was telling me he was just doing it. I was like, man, they can't use a job. I was like, man, they will not mess with me, And it ain't even a lot of money in the Uber Eats and all that stuff. That just says a lot about what society thinks about what we've been through, But yeah, so that's that as far as Tayba being there. Also, like he said, the emotional support that Sheikh provides. He's always been there. And anytime we had hard times and things got unbearable.
Story about you.
We can talk about it. Ain't nothing off the table, man. I'm here for the people.
So tell us what happened.
Well,
How they give me all the
all the tea, huh?
Well, I mean, not more so. It's not necessarily. Explain it, but explain what was learned from it and how you benefited from that situation. Don't make it.
Yeah. Well, it's still kind of fresh. It was 2 years ago. So this is a real. I'm glad we're talking about this, and I hope that tragic incident will spark a new conversation in our community, in the Muslim community. So when you come, when we come home from prison, we're damaged goods. is, we could recite Quran and put people to sleep. You want to talk about, deen, divine knowledge, we can go there with you, alhamdulillah. But that, you would think that that's the thing that matters when you come back into society. People like us, the forgotten believers, when we come back into society, you would think that that's what our brothers and sisters would judge us off of. People are human. Muslims are still human. Even though, we are the best humans, we're still human. And don't nobody want to marry somebody that came home from a decade in prison. So honestly, it made me lower the standards of getting married. And that was the root of the problem. My first wife, may Allah guide her, she was not a Muslim. I introduced Islam to her. And I knew her from a long time ago. She was an old girlfriend that I had. And, she was always the coolest person. And the whole time I was in prison, I always thought about her because she was just the coolest person. So I got back in contact with her through our mutual friend who also became Muslim while I was in prison too. And, I was like, hey, we don't do girlfriend, boyfriend, none of that. I know I needed a wife. You have to have a wife. I'm grown, I'm a grown man that just came home for 10 years. I need a wife, Nobody in the masjid thinking about you. No matter how much Quran I can recite, how much hadith I can tell you about. At that time, I was teaching ta'aleem every week at the masjid. And the sheikh that was there at the time, Sheikh Ismail, the order couldn't get filled. And out of my frustration, I lowered my standard, and which was to marry somebody who does not share the same values that you share as a Muslim. She was willing. It's a thing where non-Muslim women hear like, oh, you got to pay the bills, you got to take care of me. They know that that's mandatory. Or we tell them that that's mandatory. That's how it has to be. And like, where I sign, So I got myself in a situation that was very toxic because of that. Not saying that, I know the stories of when brothers come home and then they get a good sister and he ain't got nothing and the sister put him on, he move in with her and she gives him money and get him a car, and then he just goes and messes it all up. We all know that exists, but like I said, I was teaching ta'aleem every single week in the masjid. They know me. I lived in the masjid when I first came home. I didn't have no friends, I didn't have no family, none of that. So they knew me. And then I was literally like, with Sheikh Ismail, go over here, I'm right next to him. If I went on his right hip, I was on his left hip. Because I'm still learning from him, and I was serving him at the time he was down here still, so I could be around him and get as much benefit as I can. Sheikh Ayub was really, 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 really busy because they had started a new school in the masjid and a similar institute like Miftah. So he was really, 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 really busy. And he lived, I didn't have such a good car at that time when I first came home, and he was set up like a half hour, 40 minutes from the inner city where I was living at. And the masjid, the central masjid in Cincinnati, Clifton Masjid, Sheikh Ismail was right there, literally 5 minutes from my house, literally. So, it was more convenient. And if I get on that highway and my car break down, I'm thinking about work. I'm like, I can't do that, So that's ultimately how I got in that situation. So my ex-wife, she wasn't Muslim, and struggled to embrace Islam fully. And of course, that reflects in your behavior. I'm not innocent, but at the end of the day, I have a check system. When I'm out of line, I can be checked because I'm a Muslim. She was too, but when it's different. If I spent 10 years studying, and then at a fairly high level, so it was just unbalanced. And because the dean did not reflect in her behavior, she was always violent, just from her past. And it was ongoing, and it was embarrassing. I didn't feel comfortable going to anybody and talking to anybody because it was just embarrassing. And I dealt with it for longer than I should have. And then finally one day I was done. And I told her I was leaving, and she tried to shoot me while I was leaving. So I grabbed the gun, fought with her about the gun, took the gun from her, and called the police. And she got 3 years for that. So. Yeah. But to answer your second question, as far as that transition into society from doing so long, it wasn't hard for me because I was tired of prison. I jumped straight in, and I just figured it out, and still am figuring it out as I go. So I got it. Me personally, I haven't had any struggles with the transition. Like I said, I was tired of prison. That was behind me. Dove straight in it, and out here into society, and I'm building. Alhamdulillah.
The next question I wanted to do is how has what you've learned from your sheikh and from Tayba, how has that helped in your overall character reform?
Very good question. It completely transformed me. Being engaged with divine knowledge, it will literally make you become what you're intended to be as a human being. That's what my experience with divine knowledge has been, and I'm a major proponent for the learning of divine knowledge at any level. That's what was introduced to us by Sheikh Ayub and Sheikh Rami, the emphasis on learning divine knowledge at any level, especially for us, will completely remove you from your old thought process or pattern. That is the most essential thing. That is better than any halfway house, any rehabilitation program, and it doesn't cost nothing but time. That's it. Because at the end of the day, it's just you and Allah. You have the decision. You can't, nobody can force you to do one thing or another. So all you have is this right here and this right here. So if you're constantly working on these, if you fill this and this with divine knowledge, that's all that can come out. That's all that can come out. And the divine knowledge has solutions to our problems, which is the biggest problem in humanity altogether. We have problems and we don't know how to handle the problems. So we make a bad decision and we put ourselves in a bad predicament because of the bad decision. Some more extreme than others, like prison. And especially for the forgotten believers that are returning back to society. You have to have a firm understanding of who and what it is that you are in order for you to not recidivate. Because you're going to run into those situations. You're going to run into those situations where it's just like the old times. But what's going to make the difference? And what has made the difference for me and all of the other forgotten believers who have returned to society is that we spent a considerable amount of time building up our iman. You cannot do that unless you have a correct understanding about divine knowledge. That's the only way. And it's the only way. All the other stuff is extra. At the end of the day, you have decisions to make and what is going to influence your decisions. So if you're studying and then you have the pleasure and you have the honor and you have the benefit of studying with people like Sheikh Rami and Sheikh Ayub, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted his knowledge to and with, you get the opportunity to do that, you got to take it. You better take it. Excuse me. I'm going to correct myself. You better take it. Inshallah.
Consistency, I would say, in seeing things through. And of course, that takes a lot of discipline. And knowing who you are and where you're headed. So what character reform for me would be, or the best or the biggest takeaway, excuse me, in character reform for me would be just the ability to know how I react to situations, right? Self-knowledge, right? Because, you know, you've been in situations or exposed to situations, excuse me. You are exposed to situations in which you know how you will react if you know yourself. A lot of times people are in situations where they don't even know how they would react or what they would do, you know. So what it gave me was the knowledge of self, right? And having knowledge, and I'm not saying knowledge of self in the sense of some type of self-identity or anything like that. I'm talking about knowledge of self in behavior aspects. Because in any given situation, you have to know how you are going to react in certain situations. Because if you're in a situation and you don't know how to react, then the outcome is very unpredictable, especially when it comes to situations and circumstances in which become very difficult. And if you don't know how to handle it or know how you will react to yourself or a situation, then you have to remove yourself from that situation. I think I did that a lot in prison, right? To where I avoided a lot of conflicts simply upon the principle of I know how I'm going to react in that situation. So I'm not going to even go or put myself in that type of environment where I got to react how I know I'm going to react. And especially when it's not a good reaction. You know, if I know I'm not about this, and I'm not, by going here, we not coming out except in cuffs. So I'm not going in there. No, I just know how it's about to end. Not saying I know the future or anything, but I know myself enough to know, you know, hey, I'm not going in there. Right? I think that helps someone in society because we're going to run into a multitude of situations where it can be detrimental to how, I'm saying this from the standpoint of street business, not even necessarily street business, just being from the streets, you know. If I go over here with these guys, I know it's not a good situation. I know if I get over here, it's more than likely going to turn out a certain way. And I'm going to end up in a situation I don't want to be in. Like he said, I do not want to go back to prison. So I think it gave me an awareness of self, but at the same time, even though I do have an awareness of self, it's still very difficult to sometimes accept I don't want to say responsibility. It's not a necessarily responsibility, or I would say to accept the burden of what needs to be done in life, right? I don't know if you understand. I don't know if that makes sense, but even though I know who I am by yourself, how I react in behavioral situations, like you said, I don't like being in leadership, right? And it's always a situation where it's always somebody like, you got to do this. Like, I want you to do it, and I can help you. I want you to do it. I'd rather help as opposed to being the one that has to be up front, right? I'd rather be the helper. You need help, I can help you. But it's, Tayba has forced at in certain situations, forced leadership on you,
How has that, what kind of work are you doing? Like, are you guys doing any work in the community or anything like that right now? Or?
Yeah, like I was saying, Tayba forces leadership on you. Not saying that they's telling you to do. It's just like when you, like you say, if you know something, right? Just by the fact that you become responsible, right? So with that responsibility, you have, it forces you to actually uphold those responsibilities, right? Because those who know teaches those who don't know, right? So if I go to the masjid and you perhaps see things or around things that's going on in the masjid and it's incorrect, or well, they can benefit from this because I know this, or that's a situation where, hey, I kind of got some experience on that. I should help out. Because the hadith about concealing knowledge, the hadith about not practicing that knowledge, or, the hadith about the scholar who was taken to the hellfire, not because, he didn't know anything. It was because he knew things and he was teaching his students things which he was not himself doing, right? And then the students would ask, hey, didn't you teach us right from wrong? Didn't you command the right and forbid evil for us? And why are you going to hell? He said, well, I commanded the right, forbidding the evil because, that, of course it was correct, but at the same time, I was not the one practicing what I was preaching, right? So the duty of that knowledge that was given or obtained, is that you either give it away as it should be given away to responsible people. And you assist the spread of that knowledge, right? So I still have difficulty in accepting responsibility a lot of times. Not necessarily saying I'm trying to escape my responsibilities or not take care of them, but at the same time, I'm not looking for take on responsibilities just because I know the importance behind upholding, responsibilities, right? I think that Tayba has taught a lot of responsibility. I've probably become more responsible and focus on what's need to be focused, prioritizing things that need to be prioritized, right? As opposed to giving things, insignificant things priority. Because in the studying curriculum, they prioritize things you need to know to help you as opposed to dealing with things that you need to know that might help others, right? There's two different types of knowledge. The things that help you, and then the things that you might know that helps others, not necessarily help you as an individual, right? And what Tayba has given us is the ability to distinguish between priorities for the individual, especially in Islamic knowledge and in society as well. Right. So my thing would probably be responsibility. I would say responsibility, even though I have difficulty accepting responsibility most of the time.
Yeah, to answer your question, I'm working on building an organization that will establish institutes like MIFTA in African American communities, predominantly African American communities. There's a non-existence of divine knowledge in African American communities.
And that's where responsibility steps
in. Yeah. So I'm working on structuralizing an organization to where we will have a home base wherever it will be easiest to get it off the ground, and then franchise that all over the country, particularly in the troubled areas in the country, because that's my back home. That's my roots. And I know I'm very passionate about that, because if I would have had that alternative provided, maybe I wouldn't have went to prison and all that stuff, bad stuff wouldn't have happened. Families were shattered. My family was shattered. I had children that I haven't spoken to because of going to prison. Relationships in my family were broken up. It was just a very, we all know what's going on in African American communities. And I strongly believe that if we set up centers of learning there, then and make it accessible for the people, they will come in there and they'll get their benefit, and they'll get this transformation like we talking. That we don't have Sheikh Ramis in the hood. We don't have Sheikh Ayubs in the hood. We have brothers that somehow met individuals like that, and we know those guys. Just like I was telling you yesterday, when I met you yesterday, the first time I heard Sheikh Ayub's name was from a guy who had a drug habit on the block. That was my first encounter with Islam. So if there was an investment in our communities to any degree, to where that is set up and we have access to that, instead of having playgrounds, and let me take that back, not instead of having playgrounds, but in addition to having playgrounds, instead of producing so many LeBron Jameses, we can start producing some African American Sheikh Ramis, and those individuals could, post up in the hood for better reasons. So that's what I'm working on now. Inshallah. Make dua that it can happen, and it can. I mean.
Give us a story, because I like the way you put it.
That when I first.
You found how the brother gave you the car.
Yeah.
You got locked up with the car.
Yeah. So we had a guy in my hood named OG Reg, and he was Muslim, but he had a drug habit, and we were selling drugs in what we called a trap house, a crack house, and we got in the hood all the time. Those conversations always come up, like, is there a God? Is there not a God? Does hell exist? Does heaven exist? We was having one of those kind of conversations, and I forget how it started. And OG Reg chimed in, and he started, spitting the Islamic knowledge to us. None of us ever heard this before. So nobody took heed except for me. And he told me, he was like, man, you different. You ain't like the rest of the guys, man. You did, because I listened to him. And it was interesting. It was very, very interesting, because I was always looking for a way out of the hood. That was my circumstance, and I adapted to my environment, but I was always looking for a way out since a kid. As a kid, I thought it was going to be football. That was going to be the thing that took me and my mom and my sister out of the hood, and we could live in a better neighborhood, don't have to live in the hood. So when he said that, you know, I just got a shimmer of peace. You know, like just for the moment that he was talking, I was almost not in the hood. And like when he was talking, all the drug dealing stopped. Like nobody was coming in there to buy crack. We closed the door. Everybody was listening. It was guys smoking weed and everything in there. But everybody was like listening to him as he was telling us about the story of Musa, Isa, and it was somebody else. But what stuck with me was when he kept saying Musa. And he was like, his name is really not Moses. See, that's a European version of the word Musa. And even if you want to take it farther than that, if you want to go to the Hebrew, Moshe, I was like, man, he deep. So I talked to everybody, laughing, went back to doing what they was doing. And I pulled him to the side. And my cousin was across the street. I went to get my cousin and was like, hey, you got to hear this, man. You got to hear what OG Rez was just telling us. Because my cousin he grew up in the Nation and Black Panthers. So he always was, you know, talking that stuff. He was that dude, like in Minister Society. He was that dude, you know, like, man, y'all need to put down these brews and pick up a book. We was like, man, get out of here. What you talking? So I went and got my cousin, was like, hey, man, I was like, hey, you got to hear what OG Reg was just talking about, man. He just spit some game. So he told us again, literally, like we literally on the block. And he told us again. And, you know, they listened for a little second or whatever. And I was like, man, how can I learn more about that? And he was like, man, you got a piece of paper and pen? I was like, nah. You know, I went in my wallet and grabbed some card I had in my wallet. And he wrote on the back of the card, SHAKE, and then shake, not sheikh. But he wrote shake. And then he wrote AYYU. IU, not Ayub, but IU. You know, that's how the people in the hood, that's how they say his name. They say Sheikh Ayub. they don't know it's Sheikh Ayub, you know. But because we don't have Madaris inside of the hood that can correct us about it, you know. So I put it back in my wallet. I never called it, and I got locked up with that card in my pocket, and ended up getting classed to Warren Correctional Institution, where obviously Sheikh Ayub was the imam. That was 2 years before. That happened in 2005. I got locked up in 2007. So that literally happened 2 years before I met Sheikh Ayub. Alhamdulillah.
But yeah, I got some situation going on here.
No, but like the work that you're doing with the
right.
Ohio State.
Right. So we good? We're gonna go. Okay.
Yeah.
So I got out of the halfway house 2020, November 7, 2020. Of course, 2019. Of course, the world went into lockdown in March or February 2020, right? So I wasn't really able to engage with the community. I mean, the Muslim community in Columbus, Ohio, where I live at. Because we were locked down, they shut down all the masjid. So I only had been to the masjid a few times before everything was shut down. And they really just start allowing people to congregate and come to Jumu'ah, et cetera, like 6 months ago, perhaps. Like November, December, you know? So now I'm becoming more engaged with the community. I've established some relationships in the masajid in Columbus, the one closer to my house. I'm starting to get my social skills together within the Islamic community. You know, meeting brothers and learning who people are, letting people know who I am. You know, and just trying to be a part of the community, right? Because it's one of the difficult things that I've seen in the African American community and African Americans, period. Once we come home from prison, There isn't a community we can go back to, an African-American Muslim community that we can go back to, right? So it becomes you have to go to an established masjid. Usually it's of a different ethnicity or something like that. Not saying there's anything wrong with that, which is nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, comfortability comes into play when you're having events and stuff like that. Some brothers don't want to go. Some brothers don't want to be, it feel uncomfortable because they feel either unaccepted or just uncomfortable because there's no culture for them in there, right? So when you in there, sometimes they speak in a whole different language. In the masajid, or give it a talk in a different language. So you always got to be, hey, what did he just say? Right? I'm experiencing that, but you get used to it if you have that dedication and try to actually establish something. They don't have any problem with you, but I'm establishing that in my life now. I've been married, like he said. I was married to a sister that I've known for. I probably known since I was 13, right? We go back a long time, still know her. We end up not being compatible, I would say. And then I got into another marriage, which I'm in now. Alhamdulillah, very good. I have no complaints. So sometimes it's difficult to get the footing. I'm still getting my footing because, like I said, I've only been home and I say home, that's since 2019, November 2019. Less than 3 years, almost 2.5 years, I would say. Work, as far as making a living, I've had not numerous, I probably had 3 or 4 different jobs, right? Sometimes it's difficult because you have a felony. Can't change that, but society doesn't care for people with felonies, if you want to say, right? So I would have, like I said, the Tayba had bought tools for me. So I do a lot of my own business for the last 2 years because I was laid off during COVID, 2020. So I haven't worked for anyone since 2020, but I work for myself. I do, I'm a mobile mechanic. So I do work on people's vehicles, mobile, and I drive out to you, fix your vehicle. Pretty good at it, pretty good. Master mechanic, so I'm pretty good. I'm not shabby. Recently this year, I've been more so into doing lawn and landscaping, right? Lawn care and landscaping with one of the guys that I was in prison with, actually. He had started a lawn care business, so this year I took it to where I was going full time with him, which has been successful. We have our struggles, That's the difficulty in trying to. That's probably the biggest difficulty that I have is financial, as far as business wise, because everything's up and down. But alhamdulillah, everything's coming around. Things are tightening up, and I have no complaints. But it's a roller coaster. I'm just along the ride. I'm trying to buckle in and to stay in the seat while we make these tight turns and going over these ramps and hills. But I think things are starting to settle down, right? And inshallah ta'ala, I will be able to, I guess you would say, mold myself more so for the life ahead, right? Because I'm still in turbulent. I still feel like it's a turbulent situation because I feel like I just came home, right? And I haven't got my footing all the way, so I feel like it's a turbulent situation. But I think it's settling out, and I'm kind of figuring out, the path that needs to be taken. And inshallah ta'ala, we got some it's not over. It's gonna get a little difficult too again because nowadays they just announced that we in a recession again. So we're gonna see how that play out. But I have my faith in Allah. So and just being resourceful. But as far as studies, I'm really starting to get, like I said, I was really starting to settle down now, so I can actually further my studies now, once I get settled financially, because that's priority. If I can't live anywhere, if you can't talk to me about religion, if my stomach is growling, that growl gonna be louder than you talking about religion, or talking about being a good Muslim or a good human being. I have to eat first, or I ain't gonna be no human being. I'm gonna be in the ground, right? So I think that I'm settling out now, and inshallah ta'ala, I can become more involved. I was speaking to Sheikh Rami about that, becoming more involved as I settle the turbulent side of just the transition from prison, being incarcerated, locked up, small environment, same people, having not real major responsibilities, right? To being in the wide open world where I can go anywhere I want, do what I want, move how I want, be around the people I want, get into the trouble if I want to get in some trouble, I can get in it, right? And I'm here now to where I'm trying to become better as a Muslim.
If I could give advice to my old self, I would simply just say be Muslim and study, because that's what saved me at the end of the day. And I'm gonna take your second question and put it at the end. I'm gonna take the last question and put it in the middle. Advice to young Muslims, especially that's coming out of the neighborhood, that are going to study, if they're not married and have a family and won't get distracted by the rat race working, find somebody like Sheikh Rami, Sheikh Ayub, get up under them and get as much as you possibly can get for however long that you can afford to do it. If it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Do that for sure, and then set up a curriculum for yourself where you have your own personal sessions when you revise and reviewing what you learn. And lastly, advice that I would give to the youth, to our youth now that might be on the wrong path, I would honestly, this is the advice I gave myself. I would honestly tell them that the hardships that they're in and that they are going to encounter are inevitable. And you have to make yourself comfortable with having nothing. Only your Islam. That is the only way that we will be able to survive the situation that we are in this point in history. It's not going to change anytime soon, and it's not going to get, there isn't going to be, dare I say the word, reparations that's going to fix the equation. So we have to find a way to be content with only our deen, and if your deen is in a good, making your deen be in a good condition, because a lot of us we get depressed for missing out on things that we probably won't ever have as a part of this life. And once you go into that type of depression for not having this, not having that, then your behavior, your character can get ruined. And once your character is ruined, then you're on a bad path, if that hasn't already happened. So I just completely obliterated my expectations. I withdrew my expectations out of this life, and I put them all into building up for the next life. And I built a sanctuary in my mind that goes everywhere with me, honestly. So we don't get brokenhearted. That's a part of the problem. Is we have some systemic oppression that is at play, and it's keeping our human rights away from us. And once we believe that we could have, we could be equal. We believe that, and they're telling us that we can be equal, and they're telling us that we are equal, but reality says all but that. And once you hit that wall of reality, you give up, because you just see how far away from equality we truly are. So once I withdrew my expectations out of that and put my expectations in equality from the Islamic standpoint, that, the only thing that matters is when I go to the Qiyamah, that's the real deal, not this here. I was able to get over myself, get out of the way of myself. So I would tell our youth to buck up. It's gonna be a rough ride.
Advice to my younger self, I would say never concern yourself with the opinions of others that have no effect in your life. Right? I think as a young person, I probably concerned myself with people's opinions of me more than I should have, right? And that's not to say, I was doing it specifically for a person's opinion, doing things specifically. Well, I mean, I'm saying that with this in mind, that, sometimes do things so that this person won't look at you a certain way, right? When that person's opinion has no effect on your life. So that would be my simple advice, right? We say advice to the youth, right? As Muslim youth in education, I would say pace yourself. This is a marathon, it's not a race. I think that if you have a sincere desire to study, you obtain it with sincerity. Sometimes you might not reach what you deem to be your goal or what you deem to be the finishing point. But know that the finishing point is nowhere in this life for Islamic studies. There's no finish. Any traditional scholar or any type of person that has been in studying, they will always tell you they still are studying. There's no completion to it, right? Because the completion is in the hereafter. The finality of your studies is once that once Allah call you, He comes to get you. That's the finality. That's the completion of it. And your studies is not what you gain from a text. Your studies is what you have after you finish studying that text. And how it changed or affected you thereafter, Because a lot of people can study and go to university and go to overseas, to all the universities and learn and get all of these pieces of papers and say that I studied this or I'm a master of that. But as we know from the hadith that, you know, a lot of those people that say that they have that, they wanted to have that and a goal was obtained. So if the true goal is to study and attain that piece of paper that say that you've completed this course, you've got that reward. And Allah gives you no reward in the hereafter because your intention was to have that paper to say, I completed this 4-year course in this Alamiya program. That should never be our goal. That's not a completion of studies. You completed a course. If that was your goal, you obtained it, alhamdulillah. But here in the hereafter, you won't have a portion because your intention was to, you know, graduate. You have it, and, you know. But that's not our intention in our studies. Our studies and our intention should be to seek Allah and His favor. All right, and whatever we retain from those studies, inshallah, it benefits you here and in the hereafter, because the object of knowledge is benefit, not just to have it and hold it and keep it and say, hey, you know, I know this or I know that, because that's not going to help us on that day of judgment, right? So that would be my advice. You know that the finishing point is not here in this world, it's in the hereafter. Now, youth that are going down the wrong road, say, I've been on that same road, right? And I'm talking about, I was a youth, I didn't go to prison at 20. I was in prison at 15, you know? So I was a youth doing things that was unbecoming, right? Doing things that were illegal, doing things that, most of the time we doing it as youth, we doing it for acceptance, right? And I'm talking about youth. I'm talking about children, not adults that's 26 and stuff like that with 3 kids. No, we talking about youth, no responsibility. They got parents at home. And not all our youth have parents at home, but you're still a young child, you know. Some people have different circumstances where our young guys and girls that might be in the homeless situations or, you know what I mean, desperate situations. The best advice that can be given is this. For me, this is the best advice, but for me, I would say, know that these aren't the best days. As a youth, we don't have the best days because we haven't seen anything, right? We've seen what we've seen, but at the same time, those difficulties we experience here should never be the calling card for us to give a person power over us, right? Or to seek glory in another person saying that you lit, right? Or saying that you turned up, as you I mean, you don't want to be that, as they say, excuse my language, you want to be that nigga, right? That nigga is not always, you know, he's either dead, he was that nigga that got killed last night, right? Or he's that nigga, excuse my language. I'm only saying this as Amia, so he was that guy that got that 100 years in prison. You don't want to be those guys. There's no benefit in that. So know what constitutes a good life, right? Even though we see discouraging things every day, we see violence, we see killings, we see a lot of things that discourage us from doing anything good. Know that your impetus to do good or to do wrong should not be placated on what we see, but it should be dependent upon the end result, which is everyone has to leave, right? everyone, there's not a soul on this earth, and Allah knows best, that will be here in the next 100+ years. We all have to leave. And if you think that the lights just go off and that's it, nothing else, we are misunderstanding what life is, right? We must find meaning in something. Even if you give your own self a meaning for your life, find meaning in it. You know, we shouldn't be out here trying to take life for paltry things. You know, it seems simple, small, trivial things. Because he said something to me. I want to end this person's life. Why?
Excuse me, getting up.
Yeah, we must. We got to start doing that. So, you know, inshallah ta'ala, the youth should, we that's my advice to them, you know the value of life. And once you know the value of life, you begin to enjoy life on a deeper plane, right? Inshallah ta'ala.